Hi, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from today. Welcome to our session here with United We Dream. My name is Cynthia Garcia. My pronouns are she, hers, ella, and I have the privilege and honor to work here at United We Dream under our deportation defense and community protection work. I'm here today with Jasmine and Dulce, who are part of our team. And so we're going to get going on introducing ourselves and just talking to you for the next 30 minutes about how you can show up for immigrant communities and how we can continue to fight together to make sure that they're represented. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jasmine, and we'll get started in just a minute.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia, and hi, everyone. So happy to be able to join you virtually in this space. My name is Yasmin Martinez. I use she, her, hers, ella pronouns, and I'm joining you all this morning from California. I am currently the Central Valley organizer with United We Dream. My family actually immigrated from Mexico to California in the early 1970s, and we've been here ever since. For my family and myself, deportation has always been something that I had grown up with. The unease of the potential of our lives changing and being forced to leave from our homes was always in the back of my mind. Fortunately enough, my family is now protected, but there are so many others here, my family and my communities, that are not. So I'm here. I'm happy to join United We Dream to make sure that the agencies that continue to threaten our families and our communities and across the nation are dismantled. Passing it over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm also glad to be here joining the space along both of you and everyone else who is watching from their homes. Good afternoon, good morning. So my name is Dulce Montoya. I use pronouns she, her, ella. I'm also one of the coordinators for United We Dream Immigration+Watch hotline. So the hotline is a tool where folks are able to report agency activity in their community, such as ICE, CBP, the police, racial profiling, and the detention of a loved one. I also migrated from Mexico at the age of 12, along with my family, to the state of Oklahoma, what we now call our home. My family is of mixed status. I have DACA. I'm not so young anymore. I'm also a mom of two beautiful children, but big part of my family still remains undocumented. So this has what has kept me going and motivates me to keep on moving towards dismantling agencies that targets families just like mine, and also keep on pushing for permanent protection for all. And I'll pass it to you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Dulce. And thank you, everyone who's joining us. Wherever you are, I would love to see if you can put on the comments where you're joining us from, what are your pronouns, what brings you to this space. I think what Dulce and Jasmine shared is real. And I also want to just kind of give us some grounding before we start our conversation. I want to make sure that you know how critical spaces like today here with the Frontline are for our people. We have just passed the 100 days mark with the current administration. And I know all of us here have fought with everything in us to remove Trump from office. And more than ever, I know that you know what's at stake. Our communities haven't been safe, regardless of who is in office, which is why we need to continue to do the work beyond election day. So this week, we witnessed a community in Glasgow, Scotland, stopping a deportation by taking direct action. Over 200 people locked arms, put their bodies on the line, and shared our struggle and stopped the deportation of a community member. That is to show that immigration enforcement is also global, and our shared struggle is tied to one another, just like our liberation. And so I know Jasmine and Dulce, you both work in organizing with immigrant communities. We're immigrants ourselves, so this is true to our heart and to our own community. And so I wanted to kick it off with a small panel discussion and just share some of the questions that I want our audience today to know why we're doing this work. And also share with them next steps on how they can too continue to defend and protect immigrant communities. So I want to start with you, Jasmine, to share with us a little bit of how does the immigration enforcement feed into the larger prison industrial complex?
Okay, thank you, Cynthia, and thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it ties perfectly into this question. So, when we think of what the prison industrial complex is, we must acknowledge what it actually means. So, detaining and holding people against their will. The sole purpose of jailing people is to make profit off of them. The profits then fuel the system of policing, and the cycle continues. We see it clearly in the impact it has in our communities. The data shows that people of color are criminalized and incarcerated by the millions, while billions of dollars are spent on a system that has only harmed our people instead of investing in life affirming resources to promote health and mental wellness. We know it's pungent systems that are choice, and we must move away from them and create community based responses for accountability and transformation. Keeping these systems of oppression in place just for profit leads to the expansion of the system, creating a dependency on the carceral system for jobs and economic gains, which are other issues that are not a concern of for these detention centers. But behind these institutions, there are real people like Angelo Santos. He was a DACA recipient that was detained in a for-profit detention center from November 2017 to March 2021. While in this detention center, he was exposed to COVID-19 due to the cruelty treatment and keeping him away from his family and community. He was deported of March of this year under the new administration. He was robbed from his freedom after all the abuses and harm from agencies like ICE. The harm that started at his local police department. Angels deserves an opportunity to be home, and we must fight to bring him back home.
Mm-hmm. That's right, Jasmine. And yes, like you mentioned, we need to continue to expose ICE, CBP, and the police, right? Because we know that they continue to target and racial profile our immigrant community, especially Black immigrants and people of color. Throughout the years, we have seen a carceral system that keeps evolving. It's the same, but it keeps evolving, right? So how are we seeing incarceration now? Well, we know that ICE and CBP continue to collaborate with racist local agencies like the police to funnel large amount of people into the deportation pipeline. And if you're asking yourself, how are they doing this? They rely on programs like 287G agreements. These are contracts that allow state and local police to act as federal immigrant agents. These are voluntary contracts and agreements, and these and the collaboration between them help fuel the larger immigration detention system and the carceral system. They do it by removing people from their families, from school, work, and then placing them into prisons, jails, and detention centers. They're profiting from the suffering of our community members who have endured the abuse of and negligence right inside of these jails and detention facilities. These agencies continue to operate without accountability of the violence, sexual abuse, the medical neglect, and even death that they have caused inside of the detention centers.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Dulce. I think it's critical in this moment that we also acknowledge that COVID-19 has been weaponized in the immigration enforcement, right? We saw the closure of the border under a statement of keeping the country safe. But in the meantime, detention centers, jails, and prisons have the highest numbers of our communities impacted by COVID-19. So much so that there are data to prove that actually ICE has intentionally threatened immigrants with deportation if they speak out against what's happening in regards to COVID-19. So it's critical that we continue to expose the agencies that you both share, that we continue to acknowledge that deportations like Angel is still happening, even though Trump is no longer in office. And that Biden, under the Obama administration, was an accomplice to millions of deportations of our community in the years they were in office. And so, with that, I want to ground us to ask you the question: what have we learned from the last 4 years during the Trump administration? And how can it ground us for the fight ahead?
And I can take lead on that. That's a great question. So, during the 4 years that Trump was in office, I mean, we saw his cruel racist agenda since the beginning, right? His administration focused on increasing budgets to punitive agencies like ICE and CBP, and also the militarization of the southern border. The Trump administration exploded policies like Title 42. And if you don't know what Title 42, this is a policy that a program that expulses and deports people with the excuse of COVID-19 as a health crisis. And this allows for people to be immediately deported. This is an actual policy that the Biden administration has retained, and they must resign immediately. This program targets asylum seekers, in the vast majority being Black immigrants and immigrants of color. So we also saw the separation of children from their families, and we continue to see the increased influx of facilities to hold migrant children. These facilities are not better just because we have a new administration. We must end our response of jailing immigrants and their families, and truly start building a system that welcomes people and sees their full humanity. They need to end programs like 287G agreements and intergovernmental agreements, and also end policies like Title 42, which we have, and we know they have the power to do so. So we need to continue pushing to defund ICE and CBP and the police. These agencies were founded in racism, xenophobia, and the criminalization of our people of color. So it's time that we move into a humane immigration system that welcomes and respects and honors the human rights and the dignity of all people.
Yes, thank you, Dulce, for bringing that critical information to us. I think something that we've also been able to see in the last 4 years, as you mentioned, is the criminalizing narrative that have been used. Those narratives thus increase prison populations. Our communities live in constant fear of mass raids, not knowing whether or not they were going to return back to their families and their children. This was seen nationwide, to the point where it became a norm to see mass detentions, deportation, and larger access by ICE. In my home state of California, we have led much of the immigration policies. We have been able to provide needed COVID relief to those who were excluded from the federal relief and limited access to ICE. However, what happened was that the Trump administration was going head on against California. The Trump administration threatened to withhold funding from the state and other necessary departments. No administration should withhold relief, especially when thousands of people are at risk of a deadly disease. We should not stay complacent and demand firm leadership from the new Biden administration to put end to the Trump-era immigration policies, creating long-lasting policies that will protect our communities.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Dulce, for sharing that. I think that the piece I want to share before we move into more actionable steps is that we are going to continue to hear the statement of going back to normal. We want to go back to things before Trump. We want to go back to this sense of safety, right? And I think it's critical that we acknowledge that after Trump, after what we have lived over the last 4 years, we can't go back. We can't settle for seeing thousands of people continue to be detained for profit. We can't settle for billions of dollars spent in more systems of policing and yet be bankrupt when it comes to actually funding life affirming systems. What we're seeing is that in 2020, so many of our communities, regardless of immigration status, were labeled essential. And this year again, we are challenging if they deserve a pay that allows them to live, to take care of their families. And I think it's critical that we acknowledge that that has happened way before Trump came into office. And I think it's critical that while we have exposed a lot of what happened during the Trump era, it will continue to happen if we don't hold those elected officials accountable. The new administration has the power to do that. It has the power to say, we can and must change the way that we see migration. Immigrants in this nation are essential, and they are part of a broader community that has always been impacted by racial profiling, by lack of access to healthcare, like we're seeing in the vaccine. And they have always struggled with employment, with abuses of cheap labor, and even not getting paid, right? And so I think it's critical that we have a lot more things in common when we're fighting for fair and equitable wages, when we're fighting for healthcare. Because our shared fight is not just about citizenship. Because we know that citizenship is not keeping our Black brothers and sisters safe. And we know that citizenship is not keeping our Asian Americans safe. Communities of color have been targeted since the inception of this country, since the very genocide that allowed the US to exist. And so I want to really extend this as an invitation for us to continue to grow this movement together. Because we're fighting hundreds and hundreds of years of systemic violence and racism. And it is critical that we acknowledge that we're doing all of the small steps, one behind the other, to build the power that is going to get us to the finish line, where our people are truly free, where we're funding things that our people need, like the healthcare, like mental health, like education that doesn't leave us in debt, while agencies like ICE and CBP have billions of dollars and a slush fund that they can use and access at any time. And it is really easy right now to see this administration back off and say what's happening at the border requires more funding. But that is simply not true. Agencies like ICE and CBP will continue to hurt our people unless we stop the power and defund them fully. And even if ICE and CBP are gone, we know the police is literally killing our people. And so we shout from the rooftops that we must stand in solidarity, and we must also call for the defunding of the police. Because as Dulce shared, they are the polimigra as we know it as community, which is literally ICE and police are the same ish twice. And so it's critical that we continue this fight together. And so I want to invite you to share with us what are some of the steps that we can take to make sure that we defend and fight for our collective liberation and protect immigrants and people of color today. And Jasmine, you can kick us off.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, so what I can connect it to and some of the work that we're doing, being part of on the ground kind of person with United We Dream, we wanted to go ahead and inform our folks about the Undeniable campaign that we launched this year. Um, so our demands are very clear. Like there's no confusion of what we are demanding from this administration. Number one is to pass permanent protection, a legislative solution that includes citizenship for all 11 million undocumented people living here in the US. Number two, defunding ICE, CBP, and the police, holding these agencies accountable for the pain and deaths of immigrants that they have caused. Third is immediate protections by reinstating and expanding DACA and TPS. We know that these are programs that were limited during the Trump administration, and now we see it with our own campaigns to help first time applicants get these protections. Those are the three main demands that we are listing. And through our Undeniable campaign, we want to make sure that we are reaffirming our collective power um, when we help deliver Biden's victory and Democratic control of the Senate. We delivered for them, and now they must deliver for us. And you can take action by signing the petition that we'll be dropping in the chat.
Thank you,
Yes, and
Jasmine.
I can follow. Oh, sorry, Cynthia.
Go ahead.
I can follow up with Jasmine said, and also this is more like we talked about it, right? We continue to see arrests during the new administration. Not like things continue to move in that direction. So it's always really important to be prepared, and as a community to be prepared in case we were to encounter these agencies and how to hold our power, right? Because we hold the power. So these are the things that you need to know. So you're also able to be part of this movement, and this is what you need to do next. Um, Join us on our next event for deportation defense trainings by texting the word "Know Your Power" to 877. I'm going to repeat it again. Know Your Power to 877, o en español, Conoce tu Poder al 877, and receive like notifications of what our next trainings. You're also going to be seeing a link dropped in the chat about Know Your Power, and there you can also find like really valuable information about know your rights and know your power. Also, we need to continue to hold the current administration accountable, right? As I mentioned, we continue to see arrests. We continue to see increasement on detentions. So we need to continue to record and report agency activity in our community. Is is it like the police, CBP? It's really important that we know who is detaining, arresting, and jailing our community. So continue to report this to our Migrant Watch hotline. And if you're asking yourself, how can allies support? Well, simple. Jasmine talked about Undeniable campaign. How can you join? You can join our Undeniable campaign by also texting the word undeniable to 877-877. And I'm going to repeat it once again. Undeniable to 877-877. So go ahead and do that. Get your phones out. Text those two words. Also, click on those links that were dropped in the chat because they do hold a lot of valuable information.
Thank you. Thank you both. And, Dulce, you talked about know your power. What do we mean? We know we got us. And it is important and critical that as we saw this week in Scotland, community literally taking direct action and saying no more deportations, that's what we mean reclaiming our power. Making sure that you have those resources so that you're able to share with immigrant communities, so that you're able to also know what are some actionable steps. On that Know Your Power page at the unitedwithdream.org page, you're going to find out what can allies do to support. And it can be something simple as actually having that link available and share it with friends and with community members. We also, as Dulce shared, we have trainings about how to record immigration enforcement so that you're able to actually identify any trends that are happening in your locality. For a very long time, ICE and CBP roamed our streets without any hesitation of bursting through doors, of carrying out immigration enforcement without somebody holding them accountable, right? And so it is critical that we continue to record all forms of policing, and that we also honor and respect that the people who often they are detaining, or the people who may be at the other side where the arrest is happening, we don't want to focus on them. We want to focus on the agencies. We want to focus on how they're carrying out their operations, because that is also how we strategize on how we get our people released, on how we cut off that power, on how we end 287G agreements, on how we stop law enforcement collaboration with ICE and CBP. And before I ask our final question for Dulce and Jasmine, who have shared so much with us about their work, I want to also remind us that there are millions of people. As Dulce shared and as Jasmine shared, there's 11 million people who need a pathway to citizenship today. But there are still millions that are being displaced all around the world because of climate change, because of systemic violence, because of religion, because of identity. And so immigration shouldn't be something that we stop. It should be something that we continue to work together to welcome people, to see their full humanity, to ground us in our shared values, to ground us in what actually keep us well and connected. If COVID-19 taught us anything, is that something happening all across the globe will impact every single person. And so I want to reiterate that, because often we don't realize, right, that the model that the United States carries out by militarizing the southern border, by creating more barriers for people to freely move and migrate, there is an impact of people's lives, because people are being displaced, because people should have the freedom to seek better opportunities, to travel, right, to see the world. And while we may not have that access right now because of COVID-19, our communities have known for decades what it means to not have that access. And so it is critical more than ever that we continue to push together, that we demand the pathway to citizenship, that we demand the defunding of the agencies that are harming our people, and that we demand immediate action. As I shared, it's been over 100 days. And for many people, that's not enough time. But for communities of color all across the country, we can't wait anymore. Every day that passes, there are people who end up in detention facilities, who end up brutalized because of these agencies. And we demand more than just promises. We demand action. And so if you haven't heard more about our work, I invite you to look at the links that Dulce and Jasmine shared and that are in the chat. I welcome you to text the 877 number and join our Undeniable campaign. I invite you to come to one of our trainings on how to take direct action so that you can too replicate in many ways what we saw in the news, right? An act of community care, an act of we keep us safe, an act of no more deportations. Doesn't matter if it's across the globe or it's here in our communities, here in our backyard. So before we close off, I want to ask just Dulce and Jasmine, what keeps them grounded in this work? Because one thing that I think we all need is also joy and love, and be grounded in the love of our people. And so I can start with you, Dulce, and then go to Jasmine, and then we'll close this off.
Thank you, Cynthia. Always with the unexpected questions. But what keeps me grounded? I think my family and hope also. I feel like I still have the hope that my parents one day will have the chance to go back to what they call home and reunite with their family. And I get emotional. And also, I have hope that my kids get to see a better world, a world that includes people and where they don't see so much suffering. And that's what keeps me grounded and keeps me going every day. And I'll pass it to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Dulce. Thank you, Cynthia, for the question. I will have to agree with Dulce. My family is one of the biggest reasons that I feel grounded. They support me in all the work that we do, and I feel like I have such a great sense of family within our community that keeps me moving and doing this type of work. But another way I stay grounded, you all both know this, I have so many plants. So that's like kind of like a release. You know what they said, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. That is one way that I feel, I can ground myself, where there's so much work to do. A small sense of, relief definitely keeps me going in this work. So those are the two things that keep me grounded.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone in the audience that joined us today. Please share the video. Please stay tuned. We have more sessions that we're going to be joining together. And I know we gave you a lot of information. So I hope that we see you again. And I know that we'll see you at the front lines. Thank you.